I was very surprised when I heard that Zanuck had been to London and talked to my agent. I never thought that I was going to be involved in fighting pictures. At that time, it was just to go into France and shoot the British operation at the Arne River, and also then Sword Beach, which was the British landing. It turned out quite differently. I arrived in the Hotel Royal in Caen. The other directors were there, Bernard Vicky for the German part and Andrew Marton for the American action part. Zanuck sat down with me and he said, "I was very sorry I didn't meet you in London, but this is how you'll be working." And he just roughed out who I would have working for me, who the special effects people were. I mean, that was quite amazing. Before I actually had to start shooting, I went out to see what Marton was doing in the landings on the cliffs at La Roche. This is where the American soldiers were having to come off the boats and climb a cliff. Marton was wonderful in the way he lined up every shot. But Darryl Zanuck seemed to be looking over his shoulder on everything he shot. And that was a little reservation I had, because I liked to hear what a producer wanted, but it was then my show. So I was a little dubious about that. Oddly enough, Zanuck never did look over my shoulder.
There it is.
But as I say, I went to Les Roches. I had the chance to go there about part of 4 days. I met Rod Steiger there, who I'd made a film with. We shook hands and he said, "You know, Ken, this time we won't be doing quite exactly what we want. We have to just fit in," he said, "but I think this is going to be a sufficiently important film," and I think he was quite right. I discovered that Zanuck had 4 secretaries working for 24 hours a day, and their job was to keep in touch with films where exciting American actors were working in, and they would find that so-and-so was going to be clear for perhaps 2 days, 3 days, and you could grab them. He just wanted to get whoever he could in to help the marketing of the film. I don't know of any film that had a cast like that. But this picture doesn't depend on any of the stars. It was Zanuck's picture and Cornelius Ryan's concept.
Major Howard, there's the bridge coming up. Just on our left.
I went out to see the Arne River Bridge to decide how it should be done, and I was very lucky to discover that one of my actors, who I'd already worked with, was Richard Todd, and he had been a British parachutist in that operation. That really helped me a tremendous lot, because whenever I had the slightest doubt, I was able to say what really happened here, and he knew it all.
Up the oxen backs! The oxen backs!
I think we worked for 3 nights for the actual drop, because the drop occurred at night, and then we went on to the day action and how they got across the bridge.
It's Lovett!
The first time I met Lord Lovett, I was set up looking down the bridge and had arranged to pan from right to left to come onto the bridge. He came to me and said, "You know, Anakin, I didn't come that way, I came straight down there." I said, "But it's a better shot if we pan you on." So he said, well, I'm just telling you how it was. And Zanuck said, I think Ken's shot is a better shot. We'll do it that way. That sort of decision had to be made. And it just shows the sort of person that Zanuck was, that he was a practical producer as well as having a concept. I also remember that when we were shooting the reverse shot with Lawford leading people across the bridge, Lovett, standing beside the camera, said, I don't know why you don't use me doing that walk. I've never walked like that. That's a sissy's walk. By that time, they saw my rushes and were very pleased with them. Then Zanuck introduced me to his lady friend, Irena Demick.
The man responsible for the gala premiere, Darrell F. Zanuck, attends with Irena Demick, who plays the part of the underground heroine in The Longest Day.
And he said, you know, Ken, you're supposed to come back in November to do the landings at Sword Beach. He says, there's also a whole lot of action with the Free French, and I would like her to plan the action for the blowing up of a train. I said, well, has she done anything before? He says, no, she hasn't. She's not really done any acting before, but I think you'll find that she could be very good. And Bourgogne was the main French cameraman, and he said to me, well, it's been nice working with you, Ken, but I think you'll probably be on the way out now, because anything to do with Zanuck's girlfriend can be very dangerous. Over the 49 movies that I've made, I've come to very dangerous situations with at least 5 producers' girlfriends. In most cases, I've been able to cope with it because I understand the problem. If he'd promised to do something for them, you had to help him to do it. We became very good friends. She did exactly what I wanted, and this was the French resistance movement, and we planned for this blowing up of the train. I was given 2 top special effects people to do the train blow-up. I set up 6 cameras, and when we eventually did it, the train blew up and the engine stopped within 2 feet of the camera. It's quite a good sequence, that, I think. This led to Zanuck saying, it still isn't November. I'd like you to pick up a few more shots, which led me into the biggest sequence I'd ever done, the taking of the casino in Ouistreham, where, if you remember, the French resistance come and take a bridge. It was a sequence done by being allocated the most wonderful helicopter pilot. I think 2 of the French directors had a go at it. Certainly Vicky never had a go at it, the German. And Martin said he wasn't going to do anything in a helicopter. When we saw the rushes, it really worked. Zanuck was almost bouncing up and down, the fact that his concept had at least been achieved on film. So, as you can guess, working with his girlfriend and him, I traveled to all the various locations we did and got to know Zanuck terribly well. And he would discuss scenes he wanted, and I picked up various things that hadn't been done until we came to November, where he had discovered that in La Rochelle, the Americans were doing an exercise with 35 landing craft, purely modern training. But they were the same landing craft that had actually been used in the war, the same type. This is where I had to do this really big sequence of the British landings at Sword Beach. I did close-up stuff on the beaches, and then the big thing was to make the coverage with the landing craft coming in, bringing in Lord Lovat, but actually Peter Lawford.
In a minute now! Stand by!
Zanuck told me how he would like to see that. He said, I've been studying that and I would like the Queen's Piper, who we have, to be able to come off the ramp of that boat and to walk in waist deep, very proudly playing his pipes, and with Lawford just coming in behind him, leading the 100 British commandos, who we would all clearly see the resolution on their faces as they came in. I had set up 5 cameras all over the beach. We had 2 German Stuka planes which were coming down to bomb the landing. We had explosions fitted up. We had burning tires to give us fire and smoke. Zanuck said, you know, you've got $3 million worth of people and equipment on this. I want to see every bit of it. So I took a ride out on the landing craft which was going to do it, and I said to the top sergeant, what I need to know is how long after I give you the cue for the landing craft to actually be sloping down and onto the sand. We did 10 rehearsals of that, and every time it took 17 seconds for that to happen. Damn me if that bloody ramp didn't drop in 3 seconds. And before I could stop him, Lawford led the way down this ramp and with the Piper, and they just vanished, they disappeared. And the 100 commandos disappeared. And then watching from that boat, I saw the Piper come up, shake his bagpipes and march in, followed by a very, very bedraggled Lawford and gradually all the commandos. As I came ashore, there was Zanuck coming up to me, smoking a cigar. I said, it looked pretty good, didn't it? And he said, can you tell me why they didn't come in waist deep as we had planned? I said, well, they didn't, and maybe that's how it would have been when they really did land. He says, I'm prepared to pay for doing it again just to make sure that they come in waist deep. And so this time, the Piper went down, only waist deep, played brilliantly, and everybody went ashore, and everybody was very happy with it. After this, Lawford threatened to take a lawsuit because he said he'd nearly drowned, and what had happened was that because he was going to come in waist deep, they hadn't fastened up the uniform at the front. Therefore, a whole lot of water had come in there, and he might have drowned. So that was pretty serious.
And we all know what it means to be driven into the sea.
The slightly more amusing thing was all the commandos going under. I mean, they were commandos, so it didn't really matter. But every one of them went to the cashier and claimed that they'd put their money under their hats. And they all claimed various amounts. I think that added a few dollars to the sequence. Everybody was now very happy that we got that done, and Zanuck said, well, we're going into the studios in Paris. I'm going to make another request that you may think rather strange. He says, I would love it if you would set up the shots. Say the word to me, and I'll come down and I'll say action and cut. Here again, this was rather strange, and I said to my wife, why should I do that? She says, why not do it? I said, well, I've shot 25 movies, and he wants to finish my work. She says, yes, but you're working for him, and it won't hurt you at all to do it. So I did it. I worked for 5 weeks in the studio, and I think Zanuck came down twice and said, action and cut. And so he was happy he'd done this, and I was happy because it brought to a finish a very unusual 4-month work. I would say a great amount of kudos should go to Elmo Williams, the man right beside Zanuck every day, saying whether something had been covered well or whether it hadn't. I think Elmo did a fascinating job in pulling it all together as a film. He would take the bits that told the agonies and the amount of effort required behind each piece of D-Day history, rather than picking out the most from the face of a star. We achieved a certain concept that Zanuck had, which was to reproduce the D-Day landings as they truly were, so that you can sit in your seat and feel the hardships and the triumphs that were achieved there in various actions of that 24 hours.
London's celebrated Leicester Square was never before invaded by such crowds as those drawn to the English premiere of The Longest Day.
We eventually came to London. We had the premiere in the Leicester Square Theatre, and it was attended by Zanuck and Elmo, and that was another very nice experience too. Altogether, it was pretty wonderful.
London makes it a day to remember.